I was sharing with our previous guest as they were leaving the studio. I say I always like to have guests on the air who I would describe as energetic, and I would definitely describe our next guest that way. We're 6 minutes after 9 o'clock. It's 43 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We should also point out that State Representative Ilana Rubel has also been more than willing to work with Republicans on a number of issues during her time in the Idaho State Legislature. And she's joining me, Bill Colley, this morning on Magic Valley this morning on KLIX. We're at 44. First of all, Representative, welcome back to the program.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Bill.
I was listening earlier to the segment from Capital Update, and you were having a discussion with Jeremy about efforts to revive hemp legalization in Idaho. And I've been one of those people who look at it this way, and I'll put my cards out quickly. I was of the belief that if it helps people, especially farmers who feel they could have a market for it, I was for it. But I also understood the concerns of law enforcement and that they thought that there should be some checks and balances here. And at this point, I guess, I know you're working with Representative Dorothy Moon over on the Republican side on this, and I was mentioning off air to you that Judy Boyle, who's a Republican as well, believes that there can be some resolution to this that will make all of the stakeholders happy at some point, and you believe you might be getting closer to that.
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody thought we were going to be able to do that this session, and just that the stars did not fall into alignment. I think, we passed hemp legalization through the House overwhelmingly with, massive bipartisan support and only a very small handful of votes against it, as I recall. So I think there's a very strong will to legalize it. But it just didn't happen. And now it's, it's legal federally. It's legal in over 40 states. I think probably by the end of the year, it may be legal everywhere except Idaho. So I think if every other state can figure it out, then we should be able to.
Judy Boyle's comments that I saw, I think it was in her hometown newspaper, and I got a chance to read it, and it told me that was my free article of the month. So I guess I'm done for a while. But she commented, she said that she thought that perhaps bringing ISP in and giving them a greater say and maybe even allowing them to make some judgments on this, you could pass the law, but that they had to have a role in all of this. Is that something that would be considered going forward?
Oh, well, I mean, I think yes. I mean, I think they have to have a say one way or another, because if they don't have a say on the front end, they'll kill it on the back end. Because they have the governor's ear, and the governor will never sign anything, as far as I can tell, that ISP opposes. So if they're not involved on the front end, then probably it'll get vetoed. So I think that's right. I think we just have to, hope that they'll be open to the broadest possible resolution of this, and that they will look at how law enforcement in other states have solved this, because, clearly almost every state in the nation has found a way to work around legalizing hemp. And we must be able to do that. But I also think in the meantime, we need to not be, ruining the lives of those guys who got crossways with our law as it is right now. Those three guys that are...
A driver of a truck, and, I'm sure, excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat, but I'm sure that the driver or drivers, and I know sometimes they're more than one because they're alternating, but I'm sure that they knew on their manifest what they were carrying. But I think it's also possible that they didn't realize that going through Idaho, somebody tells you, they say, take this load from here to there, you do it, that they may have been unaware that they were actually breaking Idaho state law, and they face pretty severe consequences.
That was exactly the situation. I mean, this was industrial hemp. They knew that it was industrial hemp. I mean, the most recent driver presented himself voluntarily at the border, at the check station, with his bill of lading, saying, here's my cargo. It's industrial hemp. If you want to weigh it, here it is. I mean, he wasn't hiding anything. He absolutely thought it was legal. And you could see where he was coming from. I mean, it had been legalized in the federal farm bill. It's legal just about everywhere in America. The guy's not a lawyer. My understanding is, I don't even know if he, I think he may require some translation services. I think English may not even be his first language. He was just a working stiff, absolutely thought he was following the law, and reasonably so. I mean, I think 99 people out of 100 would probably have suspected they would be fine under those circumstances. Told by their employer to do this. It's legal everywhere else. You would never think of getting online to research and think, wow, maybe there's this one state that's, one of the only states in the country that has banned this. So it's very understandable where he was coming from, and there was clearly no intent to break the law. And that's, but technically he did, because technically it was still illegal to transport it through Idaho. But here's a case where prosecutors have a lot of power. They don't have to take everything that is technically a misstep under the law and nail you to the wall for it. They have a lot of freedom to drop charges when they feel it's appropriate. And here, at least I think, and Dorothy Moon does too, this would be a case where that would be a really good use of that discretion to not lock up these guys, because they face 5 years mandatory prison time, no possibility of parole.
So it has to then be the prosecutor's discretion, because once they bring the case and if there's a conviction, the judge won't have any discretion.
Exactly. And this is a law that we've been trying to change for 3 years to no avail. But the judge has absolutely no power in the situation. Idaho law doesn't work that way for most crimes. Almost any other crime you can think of, the judge has the power to set a sentence, but not for what they call drug trafficking. And even though it's only hemp, Idaho treats it as drug trafficking. I mean, they treat this as the biggest marijuana bust in state history. That's what the ISP called this.
When you mentioned trying to get some of these changes made, and I know that I understand some of the logic in opposition to, or any relaxing of mandatory minimums, but I think within the justice system, this is where, even with a mandatory minimum, that you have to have a cooler head that stands back and says, okay, if you want to give this guy a fine for what happened, that's we can deal with that. But I think that we've got to have some sort of common sense, and I know this is going to make a lot of my friends angry, but we might even think about a little compassion in the justice system for those people who've made some mistakes that they didn't know were mistakes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it would be hard to find a case where it would be more appropriate than here, really. I mean, how much do we want to punish somebody for, an understandable misstep, failing to Google something that I think most reasonable people would have thought was an okay thing to do. So that's exactly right. And how much do we want our tax dollars spent this way, right? And we have overcrowded prisons. We're shipping people off to Texas. This is, if we lock all these guys up for the amount of time that the law says they should be locked up for, I mean, that would be over $300,000. It's hard to think of a worse way for the state to be spending your tax dollars than to be locking up hardworking guys who are just trying to make an honest living and did something that, frankly, is probably going to be legal within a few months. They just got unlucky and hit it in this window of time where the legislature hadn't gotten their act together to fix the law yet.
But the only hope that he would have then would be a pardon from the governor.
Well, that won't fix it, because the thing is, I mean, that might save them from prison time, which would be good. I'd certainly hate to see these guys do prison time. But once they're convicted of a felony, it's really going to hamper their lives until they die. I mean, there are a lot of jobs you can't have when you have a felony conviction, including being a truck driver. You can't have a commercial driver's license if you have this charge on your record. So they would lose their livelihood and really have their lives messed up in a lot of ways if they have this on the record. And my understanding is, even if the governor pardons them, it's still going to be on the record. They're still going to carry a felony conviction with them for the rest of their lives. So really the only thing that could save them from that is if the prosecutors drop the charges.
Wanted to just tell people who might be tuning in at this moment, we're joined by State Representative Elena Rubel joining us today, and she's a Democrat serving in the Idaho House of Representatives, but she's also working closely with some Republicans across the aisle trying to find some sort of remedy to this matter that might satisfy a lot of divergent groups who've had a lot of input into it. It's not just the drivers of the truck who are bringing the hemp through the state of Idaho, but also just whether or not we have legalized hemp in the state. And if you've got a comment or question for her this morning, it's 208-736-0300, 208-736-0300. And Bill Colley with you this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX. I saw the governor's comments a couple of weeks ago. I was reading a paper. It might have been the paper out of Nampa, the Idaho Press, and I think he said that when it comes to overall legalization of marijuana, if people thought that he was going to be behind that, they elected the wrong governor. And so I don't know that I can interpret that, though, to mean that he would be opposed ultimately to hemp legalization. Do you get any feel there that he's got a different view on one or the other?
I think they're completely different questions, really. I mean, I think a lot of people who may be concerned about legalizing marijuana, in particular full recreational marijuana, would still say it's okay to legalize hemp, because hemp is a completely different animal. I mean, the THC levels are so low in hemp, you can't use it as a drug. It will not get you high. I mean, it pretty much is only useful for industrial purposes, where it has a lot of industrial purposes, right? You can use it for insulation, you can use it in food, you can use it for so many things. Honestly, the one thing you really can't use it for is to get high. It's good for everything else. So I think it really makes no sense to treat it like marijuana. So I think whatever one's positions are on marijuana legalization doesn't really carry over to what your position would be on hemp legalization. And I think my understanding is the governor would be okay with hemp legalization. He just wants there to be enough safeguards in there to make sure the ISP has the opportunity to tell the difference between marijuana and hemp.
I'm a little confused though, because I remember a couple of years ago I was doing a little of my own shopping, thinking about building a house, and I came across a company in Sun Valley, and they sell, instead of concrete blocks, they sell hempcrete. And so if they can do that legally, not that anyone's going to even try to smoke a block, right? But this is not like a Cheech and Chong movie. But I thought, gee, there must be some. Once it's processed, apparently it's okay to sell these blocks. So it seems to me we have a lot of contradictory things going on here.
You are so right on that, and that's the thing is there are hemp products everywhere, and I think you can buy CBD oil for your dog. You can find hemp salads in different restaurants. I mean, there are plenty of hemp products that have made their way into Idaho markets. And people aren't being locked up for those, thankfully. I don't want to give our prosecutors any ideas, but it's out there. And so, but it does lead to great confusion among people because they're like, well, gosh, I feel like I'm seeing hemp products all over the place, and yet sometimes, the law enforcement apparatus decides to spring into action and really nail these guys, and then sometimes they just turn a blind eye and let it be out there in the world. I think we need to just make clear that this stuff is okay, and it's not dangerous. It's not a drug. It should be treated completely differently from marijuana or any other drug. But I think the most pressing thing in the meantime is to make sure that three guys' lives aren't completely messed up while we get to the bottom of this. Because we will get to the bottom of it. As I said, I agree with Judy Boyle. I think this time next year it'll be a non-issue, and hopefully we'll have opened the door for farmers to start farming this. Transport will be fine. It'll all be fine. It's just, it'd be nice to not have the collateral damage of a few lives ruined in the meantime.
You got to do a real, though, I guess, salesmanship job over in the Senate, because I understand that's where it really met most of the hurdles.
That's exactly right. It came through the House like a freight train. Most of the House sponsored the bill. We passed it with an overwhelming supermajority. We were all for legalizing hemp this session, and it really got hung up in the Senate. Now I wasn't in that Senate committee, but my understanding is it was, law enforcement bringing in the concerns that the dogs are trained to recognize both, and it'll confuse them if the dogs can't tell the difference between hemp and marijuana, and so it'll create complicating factors. And so the ISP wanted to be able to set up checkpoints all around Idaho to screen trucks for whether they have hemp or marijuana and do all these tests. And then the House didn't like the idea of ISP checkpoints being set up along all our roads. And so all the House sponsors then pulled their sponsorship, and that was the end of the bill.
We'll take a short break. If you can stick around for a few more minutes, I know there's some folks who'd like to talk with you this morning. And we do want to mention State Representative Elena Rubel is joining us on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Spike in the temperature. We're up to 46, so it looks like we're on our way now to a quick warm-up this morning. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. This is Magic Valley This Morning. State Representative Elena Rubel is joining us this morning, and she is speaking with us about hemp legalization. And it did fail, of course, in the legislature this past session, but the subject will come up again, and there's some efforts going on among a lot of people out there to try and put it this way. The word stakeholders, I guess, is the best way to put that, and to make sure that you've got every stakeholder on board with this and all the checks and balances. Bill Colley, 2 on News Radio 1310 KLIX, 923, and we're at 45. And Representative, we have a caller who's been waiting on hold, and I think our caller has a somewhat of a contrarian view, and we're going to get him on the air and get your response too. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with State Representative Rubel. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for taking my call, Bill. Representative, I got a question for you. What does the Idaho state law say today? In Idaho, what's the law say as far as hemp?
Yeah,
okay, we both know
today. Oh, you there?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
the law says that hemp is there is not. It doesn't say anything about hemp. It treats hemp entirely as marijuana. It basically says that any variety of the cannabis plant, regardless of the amount of THC that it has, because as you know, hemp has a very very low THC amount, below 0.3%, which is means that you can't use it as a drug. But that any variety of the cannabis plant is treated as a drug and is on the controlled substances schedule, and that if you are in possession or transporting or in any way involved with any amount over, I think, 5 pounds, there's a mandatory prison sentence of 5 years with no parole. So that's what the law is right now. It just treats it completely like marijuana and subject to all the mandatory prison sentences that come with that.
Okay. Well, here's my question, and all due respect, ma'am. Honestly, it is all due respect. If somebody comes across the state line that's say in Oregon is legal to drive barely, and they've been drinking, and they come over here where ours might be a little higher, are we supposed to let them go because in Oregon the law is different? No. And I don't understand why we're just sitting here trying to satisfy every state around us. We are our own state. We're our own sovereign state. We have the right to have our own laws. And right now, what those guys did wasn't legal.
Caller, I'll let the representative get back to that. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think that there's any obligation that we have to conform to the laws around us. And you're exactly right. Idaho's a sovereign state and can and should and does have its own laws. But I think this is a case where, well, our laws are different from every other state in the country, pretty much, and from the federal law. So there is kind of a heightened level of confusion there. But this is a case where I think we don't even want our laws to be the way they are right now. I mean, I think almost anybody you ask will say, even in the legislature, I think even if you ask the governor, I think pretty much everybody would say, yeah, we probably ought to be legalizing hemp. We just kind of botched it this session just because of, disputes and personalities, and then the session just ended before everybody could hammer it out. But as I said, I would bet my house that by this time next year, hemp will be legal in Idaho. So I don't think there's any really good policy reason, even in Idaho, for it to be illegal right now. I think it's just kind of a glitch. And so my point is, I'd hate to see 3 guys go to prison over a glitch.
We've got another caller with us. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air with State Representative Elena Rebel. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I don't know. I never researched it much or fact-checked it, but years ago I was told by an older guy that the whole reason that they lumped that hemp and everything together with marijuana was because Getty Oil and DuPont it was really hot into developing plastic.
Caller, you're spot on about DuPont came up with nylon around the time World War II was breaking out, and nylon made a good rope, and DuPont didn't want the competition, obviously. I have friends who can verify that. Representative, his call brings up a point that perhaps there was some politics going on 80 years ago in all of this that impacted it.
That's really interesting to hear. I didn't know that piece of the history. I wouldn't doubt it a bit.
I have a friend who's actually he's actually an associate of the conservative Grover Norquist, and he shared those details with me. My friend lives in Delaware and knows the DuPont family, and so the caller was spot on in his history.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised because, hemp has a proud place in our history. Betsy Ross's original American flag was made out of hemp, and it was very commonly used for many, many years. So there may well have been something nefarious in how it went from being kind of a staple crop to suddenly being banned.
Well, the one comment I heard from a former undersheriff in Jerome County that his concern is, he said, in the old days, they used to go into fields and see where people would hide marijuana within other crops. And I guess the concern is amongst all law enforcers is someone growing hemp could also be growing marijuana in there, and it becomes more and more difficult for law enforcement to sort these things out.
Well, I think there are ways to work around that. I mean, there is a device right now that is a scanner, and we actually appropriated funds to buy those for the ISP to facilitate their efforts to distinguish between hemp and marijuana. But cocaine looks like sugar. Are we going to ban sugar because people could conceivably hide cocaine in a shipment of sugar? I mean, how far does it go in terms of banning useful items that are completely harmless and should be completely legal, simply because it presents some sort of a challenge and that it could resemble other things that should be illegal. That seems like a dangerous road to go down if we're going to ban harmless items because they may resemble non-harmless items. you know?
We've got about 30 seconds before a break. I've got a question for you. I know that you have a busy schedule, but could you spend a few more minutes with us on this subject? I know there's some other people who've got some questions.
Absolutely. If my spending time on the air helps those truck drivers not spend time in prison, I've got all day.
All right. Well, we've got a short break coming up. State Representative Elena Rebell joining us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're at 46. Bill Cowley with you, too, on Magic Valley this morning. The break includes a couple of fine sponsors, Todd Starnes, too, but we've got more on this subject coming up. First time I ever saw a garbage disposal of my own, I threw some watermelon rinds down it. Big mistake. 9:34. We're at 48, excuse me. Bill Cowley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And we're spending a few more minutes with State Representative Elena Rebell. She's talking with us this morning. She's a member of the House Minority Caucus in Boise, and we're talking about hemp and hemp legalization and also the charges that the truck drivers face who were arrested a few months ago as they were looking to bring the hemp across the state, as they were looking to pass through Idaho. And Representative, I've got another caller with us, and you're going to be popular this morning, aren't you? So we'll go back to the telephones. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yes, maybe there is a little bit of paranoia with this thing, and I understand, because if you look at California, Oregon, Washington, and Colorado, what is happening with recreational use is destroying the states, and the evidence is overwhelming. But I think it's also, heavily, the welfare state and people just laying around smoking dope when they should be working. When we have a situation where hemp oil does some things, but in some cases you have to have THC to help these people with their ailments, and you can see the good in it. But we're scared to death of people laying around on welfare, smoking dope and doing nothing and driving and causing trouble.
I gotta, because of time constraints, Carl, I want to thank you. Sure, thank you. I want to let the representative respond to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we just have to, and I appreciate those concerns. I think we just have to be really careful not to get sucked into too many slippery slope arguments. Because, again, there's a big, big difference between hemp and legalization of recreational marijuana. I mean, those are very, very different animals. And, again, this is something that you really can't use recreationally. It has pretty much no recreational uses in terms of getting you stoned or high or whatever. So, and I think, within short order, it will probably be legal in every single other state. So this isn't really a blue state, California, Oregon issue. I mean, this is going to be Wyoming, Montana, Texas, like everywhere, So I think basically every state in the union is going to be finding a way to navigate between industrial hemp and actual marijuana. And I do believe that we can do that. I don't think that opening the door to industrial hemp is in any way opening the door to recreational marijuana.
We have another caller, and caller, you're next. You're on the air with State Representative Elena Rebell. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. And I think there's a little document, not very well read, called the U.S. Constitution, talks about the Interstate Commerce Clause and how this will be effective. I think Idaho needs to really, because we're going to be forced into it no matter what, to really regulate it severely, because contrary to popular belief, marijuana and associated products are still a gateway drug. And in the last hour, we talked about gun issues in schools and all that, but fentanyl and the opioids kill far, far more. And we need to be very, very careful how far we let this go.
I want to thank the caller for chiming in. And again, he's sharing some of the concerns we're hearing from other folks this morning.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And again, I just want to draw a really bright line between hemp and any of those other drugs, because I think the last thing I would want to do is see us opening the door to fentanyl and heroin and all that. Um, but I think we're really not with hemp. And again, I think more or less people are on the same page. I mean, the Farm Bureau, the entire agriculture community is really pushing for legalized hemp. It's really, I think, not become a fringe position in Idaho. I think it is the mainstream position in Idaho right now that people want legalized hemp. But you're right, the ship has largely sailed because of interstate commerce, because it was legalized under the Farm Bill. Soon, my understanding of this, again, not I'm an attorney, but not in this area. But my understanding is that once the federal government finishes promulgating the rules that go along with the Farm Bill, we won't be able to block transport to it in Idaho. So I don't even think transport to Idaho, that's not going to require action by the Idaho State Legislature. That's going to happen automatically under our Constitution, given what federal law is right now. The problem that these truck drivers had is they came through in this unfortunate window of time where it had been legalized under the Farm Bill, so they thought it was legal, but the feds hadn't finished promulgating the rules, which would have made it so that Idaho couldn't arrest people for transporting it through the state. So had they done it a few months later, there would have been no way that they could have been arrested. But because they caught this unfortunate window between when the Farm Bill was passed and when the rules have yet to be finalized, that's why they got nailed. And this is why, again, I mean, it's largely a technicality and just an unfortunate bad luck of their timing here. So, I think, again, it would be really unfortunate to ruin these guys' lives because of that glitch.
I got to ask you a big favor. Can you spend a few more minutes with us? Because more people would like to talk to you. All right. We've got a short break coming up. State Representative Alana Rubel joining us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And if you've got questions or comments, and you don't have to agree with her, but she's willing to engage you in a dialogue this morning. We're at 49. It's 9:40. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I wanted to point out, I just got a great text. I've got to share this with our guest in a moment. You're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. State Representative Alana Rubel joining us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX with Bill Colley. And we've got a few more minutes left in today's edition of the program. Representative, I've been getting all sorts of messages from people who can't get through this morning when it comes to this topic. So obviously it has certainly gotten people's attention. But I have this text message. And it says, hi, Bill. Alana is doing a great job. Ask her to mention the change.org petition again. Dorothy.
Oh, I love it. Hi there, Dorothy. Great to hear from you. That's great. No, absolutely. I mean, we have a petition going because, again, the last line of defense for these guys is the prosecutor. The prosecutor does not have to bring these charges. The prosecutor has all the power in the world. They're not required by law to bring every charge that is possible and to pursue that charge to the end of time. I mean, they have full power to drop charges, change charges. They could fix this tomorrow if they wanted to. So we have a petition going to the prosecutors asking them to do exactly that and say, in this case, please use your discretion to drop the charges against these guys so that they don't go out in the world with a career-ruining felony conviction. And we have that petition going on change.org. So if you get on there, we're closing in on 6,000 signatures, and we'd love to blast through that. So change.org, I think if you just type in hemp in the search bar, it's like the fourth thing that comes up. It just says, drop charges against the hemp truck drivers. So pretty easy to find on change.org.
I wanted to mention we've got another caller with us, and that number is 208-736-0300. And caller, you're up next on KLIX. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, Bill. This is Representative Dorothy Moon.
Oh, we just were talking about you. I won't say speak of the devil because I don't want to put you in that category.
Thank you so much. I just want to say that Representative Rubel's doing a fantastic job, but I would also like to mention the change.org petition.
She just beat you to the punch.
She did. Okay.
Well, Dorothy, I'm so glad you raised that because I had forgotten to bring that up. So bless you. That's great.
Yes, so that would be wonderful if you could bring that up because we're getting signatures like crazy to help these men out.
Well, we want to thank Representative Moon, and we will talk to you again sometime soon. I'm sure. I know that we've got an event coming up with your husband and some of his activities, and I apologize. I've got to get back to him about that. But tell him I send along my best.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Alana, thank you for the great job.
Oh, thank you, Dorothy. I'll see you soon.
We want to thank her for the telephone call. And another caller looking to join us this morning. It's 9:46 on KLIX. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, Bill, I heard recently that they have come up or developing a method for law enforcement, a simple thing that they can carry to determine which is really hemp and which is marijuana. Do you know how they are with that?
Oh, that's a good question. In fact, Representative, we were just talking about that off air. There was some criticism when this first came up that there could be a device to detect the difference between the hemp and the marijuana. And some people said, well, I don't have any idea of what that is. But you were explaining to me well, you mentioned even on air that you were appropriating money to purchase these things. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can, yeah. So I wasn't in the committee where they heard about that, but that was discussed in committee, and I believe they appropriated nearly $300,000 to buy those devices. So my understanding is there's a little kind of handheld device that's, something like those things they use in Men in Black to erase memories or something.
Yeah.
some little clicky device they can use that they can flash at the plant to determine the amount of THC and determine whether it's hemp or marijuana. And my understanding is this is what they're using in other states to make this determination. And, it's a fairly straightforward thing. I'm not sure if it's completely as accurate as if you take the clippings and send it into a lab and wait a few weeks, and I'm sure you can get a higher degree of precision, but my understanding is that it's a pretty good level of precision for just doing that threshold determination of whether something is hemp or marijuana. And we did appropriate the money to buy those devices to prepare ISP to start doing this, because as I said, I think the expectation is soon that's going to be what we have to do. I mean, hemp is going to be legal to at least transport. Whether, whatever the legislature does, it will be legal to transport through Idaho because of interstate commerce. And then it's just a question of can you sell it and grow it here.
But we had, we were talking off air too as well. Wyoming not only passed this, but while the debate was still going on here, the new governor in that state ended up signing it into law. And I tend to believe Wyoming, if there's a place more conservative in its values, in its traditional views, is Wyoming. So do we know what they did? I mean, is it possible to consult them and say, how did you work out this and satisfy everybody who had concerns?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we can have conversations with a lot of states, red, blue, and purple, because I think I think maybe 42 states have already legalized hemp, and the remainder are basically in the course of doing so right now. It was on the agenda in a lot of state legislatures as they're meeting now. And so I would not be surprised if within a few months Idaho is the only state in the country that hasn't legalized hemp. So we have a lot of states that we can talk to and ask how they've done it. We can ask almost every other state, conservative, liberal, you name it.
We've got another caller looking to join us. And caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX at 9:49. Go ahead.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for putting me on. I just wanted to point out that hemp was the way that pot got started in my California town of Red Bluff, where my wife, my daughter, and I fled from. That was how they got a foot in the door. And now marijuana is everywhere. And, ignorance of the law for this truck driver is no defense. Some years ago, I think it was 2007, I was working for the Port of Oakland. We found a thermonuclear weapon had been shipped by accident, according to the shipping company, into the Port of Oakland, berth 35. And it promptly got shipped away, but the shipping company was held responsible, the captain was held responsible. Just like truckers, they have to know what they are shipping.
I want to thank the caller. Representative, your response.
No, I mean, I think they did know what they were shipping. They just didn't understand, the legal framework of what they were shipping. And, again, these guys are truck drivers. They're not lawyers. So they're working for a company, and the company says, here's a load, drive it to Denver or whatever, and they did. Maybe, one could argue that they should be more diligent, that they should do research, but, I doubt there are a lot of truckers out there who are working for a company and told to haul a load that then, go and do a thorough legal analysis of every single thing in their load. And, there had been a lot of publicity around the Farm Bill and the fact that it was now legal federally. So I think a lot of people, particularly non-lawyers who aren't necessarily super sophisticated in the law, who saw that in the papers and were like, oh, hemp is legal now, and didn't think to do that next layer of analysis of, is there still a state in the country that has it illegal, and am I driving through that state? And again, it's further complicated by the fact that just about every other state has legalized it. I get your concern about the gateway drug piece, and I think we need to try hard to learn from other states to understand how we can contain that. Again, hemp you can't get high from, so I don't know that anybody who owns a hemp product is going to be in danger of becoming a drug addict. But I think if there were pathways that led to bad things in other states, then we should probably look at that and understand how we can avoid going down that path.
We're at 40.
But I feel like where we are, hemp legalization is inevitable in Idaho. It's just a question of when.
We're at 48 right now, and we're joined by State Representative Atlanta Rebel, and 9:52, and we've got another caller, I believe, with us on Magic Valley this morning at 208-736-0300. Nope, you may have answered the caller's question. That gets us back to, though, detecting the difference, and I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a technical person. I've got to really admit that. If I pop the hood on my car with a modern automobile and a modern engine, I am lost. So when it comes down to being able to detect the difference between the two, that is still going to be, I would imagine, the questions come up. Well, what if you have, a trailer and it's filled with hemp product, but if someone has buried within the middle of these loads are massive, right? 40,000 tons sometimes. What if somebody's buried a few bales of marijuana in the middle of that? How are you going to tell the difference or find that? And I know maybe we're splitting hairs, but I've heard all of these things brought up by various people who've been critical of this whole idea.
Well, it's the same problem that you're going to have with anything, right? I mean, a person can always hide illicit, matter inside a large truckload of something else. You could have a truckload full of blenders and, hide a bag of heroin or cocaine in it somewhere. You could have a truckload of sugar, but, two of the boxes really aren't sugar, they're really cocaine. It's just, it's anytime you're shipping anything, you have the problem that somewhere in the load you could be burying something illegal. So I don't think this presents a unique challenge in that regard. I think we just have to address it the same way we address it every time it arises, any time a cargo load of anything is being shipped. And maybe you just have to inspect every single box, and maybe, but I don't think this is a new problem.
Do you know of anywhere, people like me who really, don't have a lot of background in this, and being a legislator, you got to learn a lot of things and become a good generalist very quickly. But where would someone go? Do you have any idea if they wanted to read up on the differences and what's available to be able to test and how this has worked elsewhere? There's got to be somebody who's compiling this somewhere, at least in some form on the web.
Oh, that's a great question. I'm sure if you Googled around, you'd find more than you could ever read in a lifetime. But I'm not sure what the best, single resource is in terms of where you could go and find it all most handily compiled. But yeah, I think if you started Googling, you would find an awful lot out there. I've just done a little bit of Googling and found it, it's everywhere. And lots of people spouting off, and I don't know which ones are reliable and which aren't, but there sure is a huge volume on the internet of hemp advocates and people, establishing the differences between hemp and marijuana.
Do you think that this may be, in all there's been a lot of, obviously arguments, and they've been loud on both sides at times. But do you think that perhaps, and we hate to say this, gives some people maybe a little confidence in their government that there was a lot of deliberation, you didn't get anywhere with it necessarily at the moment, but that you're going to come back and deliberate it again, and that you're taking some time out and maybe a little bit of patience in there, and being able to research all of this does speak maybe highly of our state government?
Well, I don't know that.
Go ahead, pat yourself on the back. Take a moment and do that.
I don't know that the hemp thing with our state government's shining hour this year, frankly. But I do want to let people know that there were many advocates, and as I said, this was not a partisan issue at all. There was, especially in the House, there was a very united front, pretty much across legislators of all stripes, that we wanted to open this door for our farmers. That this is a potentially very profitable crop that farmers everywhere else in the country are having a chance to take advantage of, and our farmers are being left behind. That it's presenting, injustice problems with these truckers. That there are a lot of problems with our law right now. We really wanted to fix it, and I think there was some dysfunction with respect to how it went down with the Senate. There were a lot of other moving parts in the legislature. Tempers were running high. There was a lot of anger between the House and the Senate. And I think this was just a casualty of that fight. But I don't think that it was because the legislature doesn't want to legalize hemp at all. I think they do. This was just a dropped ball.
Well, we want to say thank you for spending a little bit more time than we probably expected you would spend with us this morning. Uh, we were looking at this as a half-hour conversation, and then when people started saying they couldn't get through on the telephone lines, clearly there is a lot of interest in this, and if nothing else, the more information I think we get out to people is going to help people make a decision on this, and because this is going to be to paraphrase Joe Biden, a big deal. I'm cleaning that up a little bit.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it and happy to spend the extra time, and want to second what Representative Moon said and hop on that change.org petition so that we don't have these truck drivers caught in the crossfire.
Well, Representative, I want to thank you very much for your time again, and we'll talk soon.
Wonderful. Thanks, Bill. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. We're at 47. It's 9:56 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. But Bill Colley getting ready to wrap things up for the week on Magic Valley this morning. And I've got to be honest with you, too. I am a fence sitter on this situation, and I have been for a long time. I've been listening to the points made by law enforcement, by prosecutors, by the agricultural community, by the people who actually supported the bill in the first place. And I still need to learn a lot more because I can't sit here and say one way or another that I fully grasp all of the details of this, especially the technical details when it comes down to differences and detecting differences and the like. But I'm going to work at it. Maybe I've got some homework to do over the weekend. In the meantime, Monday morning's program, just to let you know, we've got a lot of folks coming by to join us in studio. We'll get a visit from the Twin Falls County Commission. We have a visitor coming by from the Twin Falls City Council. We've got some folks talking about local charitable cause, and we've got Dr. Christine Pickup, or one of the doctor's associates, all scheduled for Monday morning right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And God willing, if the creek don't rise, I'll be back here in this chair Monday between 6 and 10 a.m.